The information given on this program is not, nor is it intended to be legal advice. You should consult an attorney for individual advice regarding your own situation. Legal Help Live is brought to you by Pan's Restaurant and Coffee Shop at 6710 La Tierra Boulevard in Los Angeles. Barney's Beanery at 8447 Santa Monica Boulevard in Hollywood. iLearnFast.com, a division of CityCom, and Rodolfo Buonocore at www.rodolfobuonocore.com. The information given on this
We are back. We are Legal Help Live, and we're here to entertain you and answer some interesting questions, raise some interesting questions as well. We're going to be talking about neighborhood annoyances today, and we've got some very interesting guests to help us do that. Stephen, what's happening?
Well, it's a call-in show. It's live, it's local, and it's for all you viewers out there. The number will be up. You can call in at any time. You can ask us questions about it, or you can ask the guest. We've got a homeowners association representative and a chief of police, so it ought to be an interesting dichotomy. We're going to talk about irritants in the thing. Should mansion houses, big houses, be allowed? Should small houses be allowed? What about filming TV on the street? Does that upset you? What about paparazzi? What can we do about that? What about marijuana shops in the community? Neighborhood disputes.
Yep.
Development issues, high rises, density. What about restricted parking for people? What about homeless, panhandling, sober living homes?
Every neighborhood's got something going on, and a lot of neighbors have the same thing going on. We have got dogs roaming and barking at all times of day and night. We've got noisy neighbors. We've got trucks going down the street that shouldn't be going down the street. We've got motorcycles, sometimes in bands, riding up and down the boulevards at all hours of the night. We've got tree roots in your yard. We've got tree roots in the sidewalk. We've got trees falling in your house. We've got trees falling in the street on your car. We've got graffitis. We've got gangs gathering. We've got, in paper today, there was an article about a toxic situation. How'd you like to live downwind from a toxic dump? In your neighborhood. And by the way, it's some problems are the most amazing. For example, and this is very serious. Here's a problem with a sign. It's the Hollywood sign. If you live on Beechwood or anywhere near Beechwood Canyon in Hollywood, it's not the sign that's bothering you. It's there. It's static. It's been there since the 20s. But now there are like 30 or 40 tourist buses going up and down the street, and there are people taking pictures and it's clogging. So there's all kinds of things that bother people.
What about the big billboard flashing signs now that went from a static sign to a huge sign that looks like a 100-foot television screen that goes on all day and all night? The interesting legal question about all this and the educational aspect of this is that there are some federal statutes that apply. There is some state law that applies. There's the Constitution, both in California and the U.S., assuming governments are working. And then there's local governmental law. And we've got all this meshed together, which gives certain protected rights more benefits than others. Interesting area, interesting topics. We'll take your questions. And if you have them, call in at any time. It's easier to get on in the beginning than it is on the end.
Easier earlier than later, and the telephone number again is it's toll free, 1-800-405-4222. It's on the screen now. Write it down. Call in 1-800-405-4222.
And what do you do with the crazy neighbors next door?
Oh,
The
God.
ones that stand over the fence and put the hose on you. The one that comes in there and bangs and makes noises all day long. Can you get a civil restraining order for something like this? Or the neighbors who stand on the sidewalk and take pictures of all your kids
Oh, man.
all day long. Or the child molester who spends his time in prison, gets out, you look up the Megan list, and he lives 4 doors down from you. Can you notify all your neighbors about what's going on? Should you be able to notify all your neighbors? What will the police department do about it? What's the homeowners association do about it? Can you do anything about it?
Well, the reality is this. Neighborhood problems exist in every single neighborhood, and they run from the mundane to the really seriously dangerous. There are neighborhoods in the general area here in Southern California where people are afraid to go out at night because there are crimes of violence going on a regular basis up and down the street. In another circumstance, there's a teenager who lives next door, for example, and the teenager loves to do the new hobby. The new hobby now is playing the drums. What do you do when your teenage neighbor takes up the drums and he's up late at night?
What about when
There's a range.
What about when you go on vacation and you've been getting the newspaper every day for a year, and now you take your annual 2-week vacation because your boss let you go? Are you supposed to notify the newspaper, assuming there still is a newspaper around, and tell them that you're not going to be there? Or is that going to signal to the bad guys that you're gone and they're going to come in there and burglarize your house?
Yeah, we heard a really bad story recently about inside information about newspaper cancellations for a couple of weeks being fed out to a burglary gang. I mean, there's some serious stuff out there. What do you do?
And you, as a normal, regular Joe citizen, does it mean anything if you complain? If you call the police, does it really do anything? If you complain to the homeowners association, does it do anything? If you complain to the local elected official, does it do anything? I mean, most people, I think, today in Southern California hide. They go home and they hide their house.
Right.
They're afraid to go outside.
Yep.
That's wrong. Something has to be done about that.
Well, the neighborhood that I grew up in, and maybe the neighborhood you grew up in, all the kids were playing out in the street all the time. All the parents were outside talking to each other. There are fences in between houses, but they weren't so high that you couldn't talk over them, and all the neighbors talked over the fences. These were real communities, and you know what? If we went on vacation, our neighbors knew that we all went on vacation. We knew when they went on vacation. So that type of mutual respect and understanding as to what people are doing was very helpful in those days.
It's helpful today, too, if you have a community watch situation, a neighborhood watch, where groups get together and neighbors form groups to call the local police, to watch out for each other, et cetera. So I think one of the real important things is you've got to know who your neighbors are. You've got to learn what the signs of the problem are. And I think you'll have some interesting questions to ask the chief of police and the homeowners advocate about this situation, because they're from diverse communities.
They're from different communities, and they're also from different points of view. Obviously, the chief of police is the chief law enforcement officer of that community, and what he sees from his desk and hears from his officers on the street have to do with serious crimes, but also, again, mundane, a lot of everyday crimes as well. And what our homeowners association representative sees and hears are complaints from neighbors about a whole raft of things. Use your imagination. If you can use your imagination, you will come up with a couple of the things that our next guest, George, has to deal with. Interesting stuff, interesting perspectives, and what we would like to see is some calls from our television audience calling us at 1-800-405-4222, and you can ask those the chief of police and the homeowners representative directly, ask those questions, and stand back and see what answers you get. It's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting.
What gets me is a car parks in front of my house, and it's there. It's there for days.
Yes.
The only reason I know it's there for days, I see it every morning. how do you get the car away from my house? Now, I don't know if anybody's sleeping in it, but it's there. It just sits there. It's a fairly new car. It's got a license on it. It's not out of state. It's got the tags. What can I do about that?
Well, I think
Take that car away.
I think that's a really good question to ask both of our guests when they come up, and they'll be coming up in just a minute. Folks, we're going to take a little bit of a break. When we come back, we'll be visiting with our guests, and you'll be calling at 1-800-405-4222 when we come back from our break, and we'll see you then.
Stay tuned for more Legal Help Live.
Giving a little can mean a lot to people who are hungry and homeless. Victims of domestic violence need help every day.
I'm here to volunteer.
Together, we can do it. If you do one thing, take one step to help those who need it the most in your community. You just might find that you can bring a smile to those who need it the most. Share your caring at opcc.org.
Looking for something to do this week? You could visit the California Heritage Museum. The museum is open every Wednesday through Sunday, 11 a.m. till 4. Stop by and catch our latest exhibit, find unusual gifts in the museum shop, and picnic on the lawn. We're a block from the beach at Ocean Park Boulevard and Main Street in Santa Monica. The California Heritage Museum. Discover us.
When I grow up, I want to help animals. When I grow up, I want to help animals. When I grow up, I want to help animals.
Tom is my brother. He always made me laugh.
Tom is my firstborn. I taught him how to drive.
Tom is my son. At 20, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. The illness took him to the street, and we feared we'd lost him forever.
But I got help from Step Up on Second, and today I have a home. And my friends and family are back in my life.
Step Up on Second, rebuilding lives one step at a time.
Okay, we are back. We are Legal Help Live, and we have some very interesting things to talk about today. We have a guest, and that's an absolute delight. George Wolfberg. I've known George actually on and off for a long time. My kids played AYSO, and you have your AYSO kit in your car wherever you go. I know it. George went to undergrad at UCLA. Graduate school at USC, so he's a Los Angeles guy. He's now, he was in the city of Los Angeles, the chief administrative analyst, which means that you've got to be really smart in order to do that, right? Is that true?
Hope so.
One hopes so. Now he's on the Pacific Palisades Community Council. He is a community guy, and everybody in everybody's neighborhood in the West Side knows George. George, welcome to Legal Help Live.
Thank you.
What are we doing here? Why are you here?
I'm waiting for the questions.
we actually have a lot of questions that Steve and I want to ask you, but I understand we have a caller now. Could we bring that caller in right now? Is that true?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Welcome to Legal Help Live. What's your question?
My question is, I am an owner in a homeowners association. We can't figure out why the same bullies get elected on the board, and found out that the homeowners office calls owners who have not returned their ballot and tells them, you haven't returned your ballot, I can fill it in for you if you want, and the homeowner just says, okay. I believe that's illegal, but I called an attorney and they want $400 just to come out and talk to us about it.
While you're calling Legal Help Live, the number should be up there, Nancy, so for the rest of the people out in the audience out there. So what do you say about that, George? You're the advocate.
You got a bad business model there, I think. You know, in the organizations that I'm familiar with, the vote is taken when in our local community, you show up at a meeting and you show that you're a member, you get a ballot, you get introduced to all the candidates, and you check the boxes of who it is that you want to vote for. I hate to, I don't know exactly how you do with a managing company.
This is a operation for probably townhouses and condominiums. Am I correct?
Yes, it's 550 units, and
Okay.
most of the owners
All right.
are absent.
All right.
Oh.
So what happens is nobody really shows up. They do it all. Their bylaws allowed for some write-in thing, but it's probably illegal for the management company to sign your name to these ballots unless they've got some real written authorization, because it's just not right. And you might want to. Some of these groups are nonprofit organizations. Some are profit. If it's a nonprofit organization, you can get a hold of the Attorney General's office, because they regulate nonprofit charitable operations, and they have some interest.
Stay tuned for more legal help.
Well,
Here's what I took from that message. We have another caller, and maybe we should bring that caller. Give me a name, and then I'd like to bring that person in. Barney? All right, Barney, come on and talk to Legal Help Live. You got Ralph here, you got Steve there, and we got George right in the middle.
Oh, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Wow.
How you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for taking my call. My name is Bernie, and I have a situation in my area. My neighbor dug up our street for sewer repair, and it's now undrivable. Now my question is, how do I get her to fix it? Thank you.
And a follow-up question. If you can't get the neighbor to fix it, how do you get the city to fix it?
So is this the sidewalk or the?
You said street, and you
Street.
can't drive on it.
Street.
So what do you say, George? What do? You're the advocate for all these restless neighbors out there. Somebody comes in there and digs up the street.
Well, I would find out if they got a permit and find out who the permitting agency is and follow up with that agency. If they didn't get a permit, they should have. You can't dig into a public street without permission.
And it's probably a misdemeanor to do what they're doing. You might get the city prosecutor's office to file a criminal complaint against them. Code enforcement might do something on it also. And the best thing I think to do in this situation is to contact the local city councilman if it's in a district, or if they're at large, the first city councilman that returns your phone call, and explain the problem to them, and they'll do something about it. The elected officials have a whole staff in many of these cities to deal with these problems. So there is a solution to your problem. You just start dialing that telephone and you'll get an answer. The real problem is going to happen is there's a hole in front of your house, or it's on the sidewalk. You don't do anything about it. Somebody goes along, slips on the sidewalk, and not only does the city get sued, but you get sued. So you've got to do something about it.
Yeah, it's very, very dangerous. I think we've got some very good suggestions here. And maybe we're really talking about a combination of all of the above. If I have a problem with a neighbor, I may call the city council. Excellent idea, always is. But I may call George. And then George may call the city council. And you know what? I'm going to get a good response from the city council. George is going to get a great response from the city council.
George, let me ask you a question. Do the associations have any power in terms of solving the kinds of problems we're talking about? Cars parked in there, noisy neighbors, monstrosities built on little teeny lots, putting in high rises where they block your view. I mean, do these associations have any muscle?
Well, the associations need to reach out to their elected officials, to reach out to the departments that serve them, and to let them know that they are there, and to invite them to their meetings, to have a relationship, and not be beating them up, but have a good relationship to them, so when a problem comes up, they're going to want to answer. They're going to answer your call, or they're going to answer the call of the guy that's always yelling at them. They're going to answer your call first. So once you get that good relationship, call them, and maybe they can't do anything about it, but they'll at least be sympathetic.
What about all these billboards that come up now? They're all over the place. They're bigger than most of these houses, and up until recently, they were all flashing lights, and I could be watching television on the street corner. What can we do about that?
Well, that's in Los Angeles. That's been an issue that's gone back and forth with the city council, and there's the billboard people are, very influential and donate to their campaigns, and it's not easy getting a fix on that.
Yeah, but you have, say, 500 homeowner association members.
Right.
You charge minimal dues. Why don't you collect some big bucks from the neighbors? They all got a few dollars, and use that to political size. I don't know if that's the right word.
That's close.
Politicize.
Politicize. That was my major.
I'll vote with
Poli-sci.
politicize.
The elected officials. I mean, your group should be as strong as the other groups.
Well, I think a public official is going to say, well, you got 500 votes, I'm going to answer your phone call. You've got to have...
But do they?
They do.
And what kind of changes have you seen happen based on the muscle that the local organization has?
Well, you'll get a response. You'll find out exactly which button to push, and if you don't know, the elected official will know. They'll push that button for you. They will advocate for you. They will bring people together to look at the problem and say, whose problem is it? Who can solve it? And try to find out and get it solved.
I've got a question for you. It's a one-word question, and the question is motorcycles. And now that I've said that with a question mark after it, 10 o'clock Wednesday night motorcycles. What in the world is going on? And what can we do about it?
Well, there are groups that ride motorcycles that don't have the best mufflers in the world, that have a group ride. They may have one or two a week. It's late at night. They like to go on some of our local streets. They like to go on the Coast Highway. They like to go in Topanga Canyon. They like to go on Sunset Boulevard. They make a lot of noise. They send out scouts. They know if there's a police car waiting for them.
They send out scouts?
They send out scouts.
Boy Scouts?
Not Boy Scouts. They have scanners. They can listen to all the police calls. So they're very. It's a very difficult situation. The Highway Patrol did a sting on them and rounded up. They just waited until they stopped where they knew where they're going to stop, and just herded them all into the station. And they had impounded 3 bikes that were. One was, I think, stolen. One wasn't licensed. One was illegally modified, and that's a start. They probably won't go on that road again, but
I'm glad to hear somebody's doing something. And I want to go back to the phones now. We've got another caller, and they ask a more set of interesting questions than Steve and I can. So let's go back to the phones and bring in Everett. Everett, come on and talk to us.
Thank you very much. My question concerns the spread throughout the city by the thousands of bed and breakfasts. And as far as I know, anybody can put one of these things into their backyard or turn something into one in the backyard. There is no regulation. There is no business license. And if you happen to live next door to somebody who's got what they call a bed and breakfast and you have strangers going in every weekend, I don't know what anybody can do about this, and I don't know why the city isn't doing anything about this.
Well, that is a great question.
It is an interesting question.
Legally, the cases that get tested over what you can do and I'm assuming we're in a residential area. I mean, there's the home office exception. Then there's a question of when you're running a real business out of your house.
Right.
Most cities have a gross receipt tax. So these people should be paying taxes, which is
a bed tax. There's a bed tax that hotels pay.
Do bed tax laws also apply to bed and breakfast?
I believe they do,
so?
and I think there may be conditional use requirements. So it depends upon your city and what the laws are. You need to find out.
Each city in Southern California has different zoning laws, and conditional use permits are required in most non-First Amendment kind of situations. And I don't think there's a federal statute that protects the bed and breakfast, and I don't think there's a state statute that protects it. So they may be illegally operating within that residential district. So code enforcement is probably one place to go to. City council, and you might consider a lawsuit against them for operating a nuisance in your own community. I see preschools coming up in residential areas without permits. I've seen bed and breakfasts. There are some differences for areas that have to do with alcohol and drug sober living homes, because they're protected both by the Americans Disability Act, state statute, and case law in many respects if they're under 6 people living in there. But these other kind of places are actually, in many cases, violating the local zoning for the area, and you can do something about it.
You can talk to your local planning department and find out what is the zone here, and what are they permitted to do in that zone, and that'll, that's your first step. You may find out that it's perfectly legal, or maybe it's not legal. Then you have to go to code enforcement.
And if it isn't perfect, if it is legal, you can consider getting your group together and having the city that you're in pass an ordinance that makes it illegal, assuming that's not done discriminatorily. And you've got a lot of power out there, but there's more power in these associations. In groups. Because politicians enjoy the freedom of, and we enjoy the freedom of re-election, which is votes, and it takes a lot of money to run campaigns today, so all of which numbers really help.
Absolutely. By the way, when you're calling the city to find out what kind of zone this place is in, make sure you have the address. Otherwise, they're going to say, "What's the address?" And you're going to say, "Wait a second, I'll have to call you back." Sometimes it's difficult to get a hold of the right person, and once you have the right person, you don't want to have to make 2 phone calls when you can do it with 1.
And there's some associations in Southern California that are very strong. There are areas such as Westwood and some other places where nothing moves or gets built or drives or whatever it is unless the local organizations there have had their input on it. And I think cities are doing more and more to get input from the local groups. Are you finding that, George?
Yes. The city now puts out every couple of weeks, you can get a list of all the applications that have been put out throughout the city, and you can go sort it through what is happening in my community, take a look at it, and if you have a question, follow up with your council office, follow up with whoever the permitting agency is to see, well, when is that hearing going to be? How many days do I have to review the material? What is legal? What is it that they're trying to do that they can't do now? What's the special benefit that they're trying to gain from this change?
And I learned something recently. There's a creek that runs down my backyard, runs down all the air in my area, and that creek is recognized in California, and it is not only regulated by the city, but it is regulated by Fish and Game. And so they actually regulate the creek that runs down my backyard, and they actually come out there, Fish and Game wardens come out there and check it out and make sure that people are not building on it, and when they start to put a house in, it's got to be certain feet away, etc. So by looking into some of this stuff, it's amazing what you can find.
I guess the lesson there is educate yourself. If you perceive a problem or problem area or a specific set of activities or a location that constitutes a problem for you, look into it. You may find out something that's very interesting, like Fish and Game just happens to have jurisdiction in my backyard. That would be an interesting thing to find out. Yeah. We've got another call. Regina, come on and talk to us.
Regina.
Hi.
There's Regina. Regina, you call us at 1-800-405-4222, right?
I did.
Okay. What's your question?
Okay, so I live in a neighborhood, and it's not dated or anything, but my neighbors that are that live somewhere sort of in the neighborhood close to me, I don't know the exact house, but basically they have 2 big dogs that I don't know if they let them roam free or if they're constantly getting out, but we see everybody, the neighbors, everyone sees these 2 dogs, big dogs, just walking around the neighborhood, roaming free. And I have 2 small children, and I don't want 2 potentially dangerous animals just, loose and out. And I've called the police, and they've told me to call animal control, which I've done. But animal control, they can't take my call. They can't take calls after business hours. But those after hours are when we see the dog. So I don't know who to
if one enforcement agency is closed and you need enforcement, you have to call the police department and call them again and say, look, you are the enforcement agency that's on duty now. My problem is now, and I need help now.
You know, and there is a leash law, which
There
requires
is a
them,
leash law.
requires them to have a leash. And I mean, you can call, you can use the non-emergency fire department number, because sometimes they'll come out. But it's a horrible situation when you call animal control and they don't come out.
They went home for the night.
That's right.
In our neighborhood, not only do we have some dogs running around, but we've got coyotes brazenly walking down the middle of the street in the early morning. So I'm still one of the people that gets a newspaper, even though I try and read it online. I get out there and I'm met by the newspaper guy and a couple of coyotes that even know my first name now.
That's good.
So I can't, I can't even call animal department. I guess they're not around. They closed down the buildings. We're going to do a show on animal rights. And
eventually we're going to do that this season.
And so we'll get in it a little deeper. But if those dogs bite somebody, it's a horrible situation. You can get a restraining order, probably civil harassment restraining order, if you know
against the owner.
Against the owner, and name the two dogs if you know who they are. Do you know what their bark is like? I mean, for identification purposes.
Regina's she's hung up to listen to our answer.
Okay. Well, you can't get a civil restraining order, or at least try to, if you can't get any luck from the cities. But generally, with big dogs and young kids, the police ought to come out.
Yeah, there's
we'll
a
ask
danger.
the chief who's coming out here.
We're talking about the security and the safety and the health and welfare of little kids. I would think that whatever city Regina lives in, that the police department should be a little bit more responsive than that. I would hope.
I mean, if there was $50 laying in the street, somebody would show up, I would think.
I don't know about that. So you have neighbors calling you about, well, let me ask you a different question. Do you have neighbors calling you about coyotes or skunks or anything like that?
We have coyote issues. I've seen coyotes walking down my street. You know, they look like an ordinary dog when you go, and the ears don't perk up and they don't look at you. That's a coyote. And one of the reasons that the coyotes are there is because there's food. And what is the food? Believe it or not, it's rats, mice, raccoons,
in my newspaper.
maybe small deer, and it's food that people leave out. If you leave food out and it's your cat, the coyotes, you know, that's an hors d'oeuvre. They love your cat.
Well, if you just look around what's going on in Southern California, there are mountain lions in the Griffith Park area.
And wait a second, above Santa Monica, there was a mountain lion in Santa Monica a couple of years ago.
And there was a skunk in your front yard.
There was a skunk in my front yard, and we came nose to nose just the other night, and he was actually gratefully left.
Of course, you have a question. In some areas, you've got gangs in front of your house. In some areas, you got skunks. So I guess it's a.
I think the PD would show up faster for a gang than a skunk. I just have that feeling. Amazing. So you get skunk calls? Or just coyote calls?
I've never gotten a skunk call.
Well, I wasn't going to call you.
Coyotes, yes.
Lots of coyotes.
One thing that's always interested me is the restricted parking areas, where the city restricts an area only to residents to park. They try and do it a block or so from commercial zones, so people don't park in front of your house. But what they do, George, is they park the next block up. And so the first block's got some protection. The second block has none. What can we do about that?
I think that's just the nature of the beast. When you start restricting, it just keeps moving, domino effect, block by block by block, and it never ends.
So we shouldn't have restricted parking.
Well, I'm not too much in favor of that, but I think that businesses need to encourage their employees to carpool, to take public transit, to ride their bicycles, and if they can't, they need to provide some parking on site for their employees.
Well, then let me ask this question. Doesn't your groups fight some of these developing operations that get all kinds of exemptions from parking, etc.? They build these high rises, they don't have enough parking, they start parking in front of my house. So I get up in the morning, I first face the coyotes, then I face all the people who take all the parking spaces.
Yep. We definitely would be concerned about that.
Let me ask you a question. We're going to have to sign off in just a minute. Cell phone antennas, is that still an issue?
Big.
Still a big issue? Nobody wants, everybody wants to use a cell phone, but nobody wants to have an antenna down the street.
Exactly. Well, one of the big issues with the cell phone situation in the city of Los Angeles, and there is a bill that is been working its way. It's like the squirrel through the python or whatever. It's not moving very fast, but it's gone back to the city attorney for some more tweaking. And basically, the situation is that there are no proper controls for cell towers in public rights of way for protection of the neighbors, and that's something that we have advocated strongly.
Well, wait. Why don't they just put a tree on top of a telephone pole?
That's really hard to tell. It's really hard to tell that never mind.
It fits in with your ecological, dreams that you
like. If you like really tall telephone poles, you know what? Interesting issue. lots of interesting issues, and a fantastic and wonderful George Wolfberg to be here to answer those questions. We really appreciate your time and your ability to be here with us today. We have to take a break now. When we come back, we'll be with our next guest, and I'll let you know who that is when we come back from our break, and that will be in just a few minutes.
Stay tuned for more Legal Help Live.
Our doors are open to all at St. Joseph Center, where we provide intervention, prevention, and education services. Our early childhood development centers encourage learning while parents seek work. Families receive food for the week. Case managers counsel seniors, veterans, and families. We also teach job skills to young and old. Experience the joy of helping at St. Joseph Center. We're planting hope, growing lives for all those in need.
A stranger on the phone said I won a sweepstakes, but I was smarter.
Someone tried to open a credit card in my name, but I was smarter.
A friend said I should sign my house over to him, but I was smarter.
The Los Angeles County Department of Consumer Affairs can help you avoid scams and protect your financial well-being. Don't become another victim of fraud. Call the Department of Consumer Affairs and we'll help you be
Smarter Seniors.
Before Christmas, my life was a mess. I was incarcerated, a drug addict, totally confused and didn't have any sense of direction. Some of the things they did is they gave me mock interviews, they assist me with my application. What I'm doing now, I work for a company that gives me a lot of responsibilities, and it's been great. It's been good.
After my service ended, the biggest battle I faced was readjusting to civilian life.
New Directions provides services specifically for women like you who face homelessness, substance abuse, and trauma.
I joined the military to save lives. New Directions helped me save my own.
If you were honorably discharged from the military, you're entitled to veteran services. Go to ndvets.org for help.
We are back. We are Legal Help Live. You're calling us at 1-800-405-4222. Today, we are all over neighborhood annoyances, and I'm talking about from the mundane to the serious to the trivial to the it bothers one person, it's not going to bother somebody else, to really serious crime. And when we're talking about crime, we've got the ideal guest sitting between.
We don't have a criminal next to us. My wallet's gone. Wait a second.
Check your watch. You got your watch? We have Kevin McClure. Kevin is the chief of police for the city of Montebello. It's one of the larger cities in the county of Los Angeles. Before Kevin was chief of police in Montebello, and by the way, you've got 75 sworn officers under you?
75 sworn, yes.
That's a serious police department. Before that, from 1981 to a couple of years ago, you were with the city of Los Angeles. You were, I guess your last job was commanding officer of robbery homicide. That sounds like a pretty easy gig, I guess.
That'd be a good show.
There's plenty of shows, yes.
Kevin's here to help us out with your calls. You're going to be calling and asking questions. We've got some questions for the chief as well. and you're calling us at 1-800-405-4222, and we'll be looking forward to taking those calls and watching Kevin answer those questions.
Chief, so it used to be that if I went up to you to buy some marijuana, I'd get arrested and sent to jail. Not you, but you would arrest me, and I probably wouldn't buy it. But now I can go into the local shops in various cities and just buy marijuana, and I get Chunky Monkey, Big Joe, Little Susie. Give me it all. What's going on? Is there any regulations now anymore? I can even grow it. They even grow it in their backyard.
It is something that currently now there's just the legislation is all in flux as far as what's going to happen with this, and everybody's trying different angles to see whether or not it'll be legalized, it'll not be legalized. And truly what's going on is that it's a front, I will say, to basically legalize marijuana by using the medicinal aspect of it.
Oh, my neck hurts. I need to get you don't even need a prescription, do you?
Well, the prescriptions are pretty easy to get also. In fact, it's actually, I think from a personal standpoint and from a law enforcement standpoint, I think the majority of us all think that if it was something that's going to help people from a medicinal standpoint, if I thought it was going to help one of my family members or somebody new, I would say I want it available. But that's really not what's happening. There's more regulations for you to get high blood pressure medicine or cholesterol medicine than there is to buy marijuana from these collectives.
Yeah, you got to see a real doctor before you
got
get high blood pressure
You got to
medicine.
see doctors, and and the drugs that the doctors prescribe, they have actually been tested. So we know that if you take a certain drug for too long, it may cause kidney damage. Do we know the marijuana that you're buying, the Big Susie, Little Joe, whatever it was you were talking about, nobody knows what's in that. And the pesticides, I heard you talk earlier about the Department of Fish and Game. If you look at what the illegal grows in the Humboldt County area up front, just the pesticides that they're using just in our national forest are actually devastating just the wildlife in the forest by what they're doing. So
interesting issue, and maybe we can circle back to that. But we've been asking people to call us, and Melissa has just called us at 1-800-405-4222. Melissa, come on and talk to us. Ask a question.
Hi guys.
How are you?
Good. I appreciate you taking my question. I live in a neighborhood where everyone is beige, and I'm not. And I want to paint my house a different color.
Are you talking about house paint?
Yeah.
Oh,
and my neighbor says he's going to call the police on me if I continue to paint my house the very bright, fresh color that I'm painting it. Is that true? Am I breaking the law by painting my house whatever color I want?
Well, there's some regulatory laws in some areas. When they put the houses in, they have to meet certain standards. When they're put in, like in a planned development, or on the East Coast, there are lots of places that are in colonial areas or old areas where they got to be the same. I think Cerritos has some pretty restrictive colors that
true.
you can.
I know that's true.
That you can build on. What about? That's an interesting question, Chief. Are you going to go out and arrest this woman?
Would be highly unlikely. Highly unlikely that we would have the time. That was probably a better question for the previous guest as a homeowners association.
But you're going to get your dispatcher's going to get that call.
Yeah, and we do get those
George
calls.
already told everybody to call the police department.
Yeah, I wanted to thank him on the way out the door. No, that's not an issue unless that would be something dealt by a homeowners association, some type of community code that you may have, but it's certainly not going to be a police department issue.
But there is a case going on in Southern California right now where someone is putting murals on the outside of their house, and the neighbors are all up in arms, and they are calling the police and code enforcement because they don't want this mural, which is a piece of artwork. It could be graffiti to some, others it's an artwork. Interesting First Amendment issue. When I went to law school, it was called zoning for aesthetics. And cities do have some powers to regulate in that area. It's a question of free speech versus zoning for aesthetics. So
let me tweak the question just a little bit. If it's a zoning violation and the police department gets a call, do you respond?
Most likely not. For a zoning issue like that, no, we probably would not. That's something that's going to be handled more administratively, maybe with your code enforcement type of folks that would handle that. But that's certainly not something that that we would be responding to simply because of that.
Okay.
Now,
It is better to paint and bear the shame than not to paint and get the blame.
That's very good, Stephen. I want you to write that down. We're going to use that.
So
as
Melissa, go out and paint your house whatever color you want. And if the next call is from jail, I'm in trouble.
Melissa, good luck. We wish you good luck. We have another caller already. Let's take the call from Jessica. Jessica, come on in and talk to us. You got a question?
Good
Jessica?
afternoon.
Jessica,
Hi, yes,
good
I do.
afternoon.
Hi, I'm a concerned neighbor. We have a very unstable neighbor who attracts a large, scary crowd of people who come around, all hours of the day and night. And I don't know if they're doing anything illegal, but I do know that everyone on the street is in just a constant state of anxiety. And, this isn't that kind of neighborhood. Is there any recourse?
Well, assuming it's not Halloween, because that's when you want scary neighbors. But
yeah, I'm assuming this is something that's going on pretty regular. And there are things that you can do for that. And that is definitely something where whoever your liaison in your community is with your police department, you should be explaining those things to them so they can actually take a look from a more professional standpoint to see exactly what it is that's taking place, what's going on there, and determine whether or not it is illegal activity or it's anything that can be regulated by law enforcement. So that would be my first recommendation to you is talk to that person. If you have other community members that have the same concerns, I would recommend that you meet with them as a group and discuss the issue.
one of the things you can do is you can start keeping logs of what's going on, who's coming in, put the license plates down. They're all in public places. Get a video camera on your own property. You can video anything that's going on outside there. Get pictures of what's going on, and that sort of deters people from doing these things because and maybe it's just legitimate people who are walking in and out, but maybe there's something inappropriate going on. But a video camera and logs help to recreate what's going on when you want to talk to somebody. I found that in the past. What do you think of that, Chief?
Yeah, absolutely. I encourage everybody to, if you see stuff, write it down. Most of our memories just aren't that good. I know that mine's not, so I have to write everything down. So you see stuff, you write stuff down that you think is pertinent. And it may not be at all, but you have that information, you give it to the right people who can start looking into the problem and see if there's a way to resolve it. And there's numerous paths that they could take based on what's actually occurring. But they'd have to find out exactly what's occurring first.
I think that's a good idea. And by the way, this is the best part of my memory right here. We have another caller. Let's talk to Martha. Is that Martha? Did I get that right? Okay, Martha, come on in and talk to us.
Hi, I have a question, and I don't know this. I don't know if this happens often or what, but one night my neighbor's daughter came home from college with a small truck. I guess it was around midnight. Started taking stuff out of the truck, I guess, to go home. And then another neighbor called in a burglary. And then in the next thing we know, there were so many police and a helicopter were at the scene. And why did the police overreact like that?
Well, firstly,
without investigating.
Martha, I'm going to ask the chief a preliminary question. Did the police overreact?
I personally don't think so, no.
Oh, come on. Come on.
If your home was being broken into, which is just with the little bit of information you've given me, if somebody's actually breaking into a home at 12 o'clock at night, many times we assume that there's people asleep inside that house that could be in danger. So we are going to respond with one of the highest responses to a call like that.
What's your response time in Montebello, just generally?
Montebello, we currently, for priority 1 emergency calls, is about 3 minutes.
And just generally, if you live in the city of Los Angeles, say Pacific Palisades or West Los Angeles, because I knew you were the commander of West Los Angeles, what's the response time for a patrol car to go out, assuming somebody called her in my house and shooting? Just the normal, there's suspicious people around here.
I think
within the first day?
For priority 1 response calls, I believe that the city of LA has got it somewhere in the 7 to 9 minute response time.
But for the normal call where there's not shooting involved or they're in my house?
It could be a 24-hour turnaround.
Yeah, that's the problem.
You
shouldn't complain.
Yeah.
You're getting some response.
Martha, I had a car parked in San Francisco once, and somebody broke into it. And they took a couple of things. They left a lot of valuable things, and I was happy about that. When I called the San Francisco Police Department and I said, somebody just broke into my car and took some things out of it, and the window's broken now, can you do anything about it? When the guy answering the phone stopped laughing, and it took a little while, he said, no, if you want to come down and write a report, otherwise don't worry about it.
But
Montebello treat things like that?
Well, one thing that most law enforcement agencies have gone to, we have online reporting. So for the non-emergency type responses, we encourage people to use the online reporting. It's much quicker for us to get the information and actually get it to an investigator to actually start looking at it, as opposed to taking an officer who may be responding to emergency calls and send them to a non-priority call to
But on the other hand, if 6 neighbors call about the same thing at the same time, I assume you treat that a little more seriously.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it may have been your other neighbors calling too. You never know.
Well, let's carry this story a little bit farther forward. We have a situation where Martha's neighbor's daughter comes home with a truck and stuff, and she's taking stuff into the house. 12 o'clock at night. Police called. Police show up in force. What do the police do now? What do they do? Just carry it to the end of the story?
Help her carry the stuff in.
No, I don't think so.
We're going to make sure that everybody's there belongs there. Make sure that everything that is happening for the right reasons. And once we are able to verify that, and it's a matter of, we're going to want to see identification. We're going to want to have verification from people that this person belongs there. Too often, there are people that are that good that convince law enforcement that they belong there, and we've left, and they really don't belong there. And we find out later that, they may have cleaned things out.
Oh, that's
So you either get too much response, no response. I'm sure there's something in the middle. I haven't heard any complaints from our caller that the police were improper. They just put out some force out there. Most people would be happy for that, to get somebody out there. Yeah, one car out there.
I would say as a police chief, would make me happy knowing that there was that type of response.
I got to be honest with you. If that happened in my neighborhood and the police
no
showed up,
cars in your neighborhood.
Well, firstly, they don't know where I live. The fire department does. Police department, I'm not sure. The last thing I would say to the last police officer as he or she was leaving is thank you.
Yeah, well.
Absolutely.
We appreciate that.
So let me ask this question. We've been living in really challenging times now with all the problems on the schools. And as a neighborhood situation, there are elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools all over our communities. Is it appropriate now, or is it being done that I was reading that they're arming school teachers with guns in some locations. Is that really going on? And is it helpful for the neighborhood, or should it be? Or
there are some states that have done that. I would be the first one to argue against that. I just don't think that that's the most appropriate use of, anybody you put a firearm in their hands needs to be trained, especially if you're giving them that firearm to use to save a life. It's a decision that, on TV it's very easy to make that decision. You see it made all the time on TV, and there's no repercussions for it. In real life, that's something that most people deal with for years to come, and that's police officers. We're normal people. We do deal with those situations and have to deal with the aftermath that goes with it. Not just the dealing of potentially taking another life, but now all the legal things that go with it. Was it justified? Was it not justified? Am I going to prison? Am I going to lose my house? Am I going to be sued by people? There's all those things that come into play when police officers use deadly force that you don't see on TV.
And another question along that way, what I do see is that officers are now have more cameras on them, more sound equipment, and I remember the Nixon days when there was tape in the White House and it get turned off. Mm-hmm. How do you get the officers to keep the tape on or the sound on during the entire incident so it doesn't get sliced out? I always wondered about that.
Well, most of it is programmed to stay on during certain times.
So it's helpful for the officer, assuming it's appropriate.
Yeah, it's a great tool. I believe cameras are a great tool. They're there to help if used appropriately. And there's certainly rules in place as far as how they stay on. I know some of them, the car, when you turn your lights on, cameras, sound, everything goes on. It can't go off until you turn that off. So if you're outside the car, it's on. So you're live.
I'm sorry, let me ask you a video question. Shirt or chest video?
Yes.
The city of Los Angeles is exploring that?
Yes.
Is it good idea, bad idea?
I'm an advocate for it. I believe that cameras, if the right rules are in place, look, the big problem or the argument is how will it be used? Can it be used against the officer for administrative disciplinary things?
Well, of course
And
it can.
That becomes right, and if your systems of discipline are sound systems and they're fair systems, then that should not be a problem.
Well, what about extending the cameras that a local ordinance that would say that if you own a home in any town, in any city, you must have a security camera on the front that's operable and records and keeps the tape for 7 days. That would prevent lots of bad people from coming in and breaking into the house. It'd be on camera.
I'd love to have that.
Wouldn't that be a great?
Yeah, I think it'd be.
Who pays for it?
We do.
And it would have to be the homeowner.
Yeah.
The individual homeowner.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, you can buy camera systems at any of the major chains for less than $100 with a video thing. You keep it. What a marvelous system for security.
Many businesses now in the business community, whether it be industrial communities, commercial communities, are now putting in, when they put in their camera systems, they're actually consulting with us and saying, we're putting a camera system in anyways. What do you want to see?
That's a great idea.
And the businesses that do that, it's huge for us. We have a large industrial community in the south end of the city. Well, some of these businesses now are putting exterior cameras in that are actually catching the street too. So that if we have issues on the street, we can actually go to them and say, can we pull your cameras and take a look? And everybody has been 100% supportive that has participated in that.
Well, I do know that there are serious crimes committed, and what we see on television in the investigation of these crimes, or as people are being charged, we see video footage of the crimes committed from 3 or 4 or 5 different perspectives. Most of them are fixed cameras, but every once in a while you also have the amateur with a video, or the smartphone in their hand taking videos as well. I mean, it's maybe a surplus of video information, but on the other hand, as you say, tremendous law enforcement.
Well,
Absolutely.
and another area for other parts of Southern California are the gang problems.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us whether the gang injunctions are working and whether they're helping law enforcement and whether they're helping the neighborhoods? And that's where an injunction is issued by a court where they can't stay together, they can't be in certain areas, et cetera. Aside and apart from First Amendment and association rights, are they working?
Yes, absolutely they work. The injunctions, look, in the places that City of Montebello has a gang injunction in place on one of our local gangs that has done a great deal to keep them off the streets. When you have these gangs, when injunctions come into play, that's because these gangs now own those communities. People live in fear. They stay inside their houses. You don't have kids playing football out on the street and kids running around riding their bikes because they don't know if there's going to be a drive-by shooting. So there's just complete and total fear in those communities, and that's why those gang injunctions are put in place. And yes, they do work.
Excellent question, Stephen. Fantastic answer. But all of your answers have been very, very helpful and wonderful answers. Folks, we got to go. That was a really, really fast moment in time that we had some wonderful guests and some fantastic questions from you, the viewers, and we appreciate that very much. Chief, great that you were here. Thank you so much for your time and all your good words. Folks, we got to go. It's time. We'll see you next time right here on Legal Help Live. I'm Ralph. That's Steve. And we're looking forward to seeing you next time. Take care, everybody.